free. The cameraman before her, Jose Orduna, counted down on the fingers of his left hand, his right holding the large camera. Young Ten stood waiting patiently beside two Holcanitan citizens, who she had prepped for the interview. The last few days on planet had been incredible, but it hadn't taken long for her to get into the same rhythm she always had. Her job had been the same for 3 decades. The war is the war is the war, as her mentor had taught her. 2. A week earlier, Impalato ships had shrieked down from the sky and flown across this part of the colony planet, a populated area with a strong military presence nearby. Several political targets had been taken out with missiles that hit city administrative buildings, and further, the hydroelectric dam had been blown to pieces. Power had been lost to over 2 million Holcanitan citizens, but worse, thousands had been killed in the immediate flooding. Many were missing, and they were struggling to tally the dead. 1. This was Yun's first on-planet assignment for a war that had been going on for 2 years now. Earth's joining of the Galactic Federation was soon to celebrate its first anniversary, and those in charge had recently reached out with a request to send someone to the front lines. When her boss at the station had sat her down to tell her of their success, he had to clarify something. And amidst the incredible news, a strange expression had contorted his face. Just one thing. You're going to be the only one down there. I know, but I'll have Jose. That's not what I meant. Yun, the folks at the White House had to explain that we were sending you to the war. Not a Holcanitan ship, or to talk to a Holcanitan politician. Apparently, the conversation went, "We want to send a war correspondent," and their reply was, "What's that?" Jose's finger flicked to point at her. Go. The knocking on his door was hasty, and done out of habit if nothing else, in unison with the subordinates that barged into his office. "Prime Minister," she spoke, "there's something you need to see." The Impelatonian flicked his claws against the desk in a gesture of irritation, but didn't reprimand her. "Apologies," he spoke to the man he'd been speaking with. "If you'll give me a moment." "Of course." Prime Minister Palanet stood from his desk and walked quickly with the woman into the adjacent room, shutting the door behind them. "What in voice name was that about?" "You need to see this." She walked around the large meeting table, over to the screen on the left wall, tapping to turn it on and then rapidly flipping it to view broadcast channels, selecting one. A voice filled the room, and Palanet watched for almost 30 seconds, stunned, before speaking. "What is this?" he asked, slowly. "It's an Earth war correspondent." "Yes, I can see that." The Impelatonian snapped, pointing a claw at the screen. "That's a Holcanitan citizen. Is this live? What in voice name are they doing on a Holcanitan colony planet? Talking to some random citizen, live? They said they were unbiased, looking only for facts, the truth as we see it. And they said they were sending the reporter here." "And they did," she told him. "I saw his work yesterday and he's talented." She pointed a claw at the screen. "This is not him. He is in Arco right now, and this one has short hair but is a female. We made a mistake. We thought they were asking to send their war correspondent to speak to our soldiers and civilians." Palanet interrupted. "That's what they did. And you know my staff and I spoke to their president myself. He explained the whole concept to me. Someone who goes to get real footage from real people, as he put it." "Wait. Earth is still divided," he stammered. "Are you telling me another one of their presidents sent theirs?" She suddenly looked tired. "No, Prime Minister. I'm saying that the position is not what we assumed. Looking back, I realize we made assumptions, taking the words of the President and his staff as the only things we needed to know. We assumed the human they sung praises of, James Arrington, was the only war correspondent on Earth, that it was a rare and prestigious job, and they were sending one to us in a gesture of allyship. What are you saying? I'm saying that it is just a job. Dangerous, of course. Hundreds have died over the years, but a job nonetheless. This is the first off-planet war they are covering, and they were professional and respectful about introducing the idea. But there's a good reason they were shocked no other species has an equivalent. There isn't just one Earth war correspondent, or two. There are thousands. Yun stood in ankle-deep water, outside the remnants of a home that had belonged to two male Holcanitan citizens, both mic'd. They had been lucky, visiting family on the day of the flooding, and both had survived. What they had returned to, when it was safe to do so, was no longer a home. The interview was after an attack, comparatively safe considering the battles Yun had covered over the years. Since non-human war coverage was brand new, her schedule had been designed to give her and Jose a gradual learning curve. Dozens of reporters at Yun's HQ back on Earth were constantly gathering and explaining information about this conflict, putting it into context and studying like they hadn't since college. Now Yun spoke into the camera perched skillfully on Jose's shoulder, a camera that was rugged to the extreme, its innards easy to repair but also costing more than Yun would make in a year. This is Yun Tang, Earth War correspondent, reporting from Rawkin City on the Holcanitan colony planet, Balstona. Yun knew that back on her ship, her colleagues had already done 3 minutes of background, introduction for viewers. They had the context. Now it was time for her part. I'm standing with Alti and Ramino, outside what used to be their home. Can you explain to the viewers what you told me? Yun asked the man beside her, angling herself towards him. Jung had surprised the couple when they realized she was fluent in Linkati, the most common language on their home planet, and almost exclusively spoken in colonies. But while translators would suffice for galactic viewers, when it came to those on the ground, human reporters knew there was no substitute for speaking the language. As soon as they passed the point of first contact, and had the tech to teach them, many had started learning the basics of any languages they could pronounce. By this point, Jung could possibly speak 2 other alien languages. After studying the history of several conflicts, she prioritized which language she wanted to learn first, but knew she'd be continuing this component of her training for the rest of her career. Learning the past few hundred years of contextual history before going in for the coverage was one thing. Learning the language was another, and learning a completely new body language was unprecedented. Alti gestured with his head, and what Yun had learned was the equivalent of a nod. He hesitated for a moment, though, overwhelmed. She saw it in his eyes. Their species shared that striking commonality. He spoke to her, meeting her gaze and ignoring the camera, as she'd instructed. Ramino and I, were visiting his sister. Her family lives over 100 miles away. Suddenly our communicator started overwhelming us with messages from friends. We turned on the news and saw the dam had been destroyed. Alti shifted his weight, his ears flicking back and forth in stress, much like a horse. I couldn't understand at first. I didn't know what I was looking at. I had to force myself to realize that I was looking at my town. It was just gone, razed to the ground by the water. Ramino intertwined his arm with his partner's, and Alti clutched his wrist in return. We knew the military base nearby used it for power, but we didn't think the In-Pelotonian would. We lost everything we had, Ramino told her, taking over. His skin was paling, the equivalent of a human appearing on the verge of tears. But we can only be grateful that we weren't here. I can't count how many people I knew who were killed. How many children? Alti and I will be in mourning for weeks. Yun took the momentary pause to speak up with her next question. When Jose had given her the gesture that they were live, she had felt that same feeling of clicking into place that she'd had hundreds of times before. From here on out, it was just a matter of doing her job. She'd already spoken to several other civilians and military personnel currently on the ground, ensuring they knew her job was not judgment. It was objectivity, to know their history and culture, and ask the right questions to let the galaxy, including civilians on both sides of the conflict, learn more than they could before. To broadcast live, uncut, unaltered. To allow everyone watching to know the truth. Their truth. The war is the war is the war.